14 hours. That's all Daniel Wright had with his wife after 5 years in prison. 14 hours between walking through those prison gates and collapsing on his bathroom floor, dying. 14 hours before Sarah disappeared into the night, leaving everything behind. On November 18, 2019, Sarah stood in that prison parking lot with tears streaming down her face, waiting for the man she'd loved since she was 24. The man she'd visited every single Saturday for 5 years. The man she'd sacrificed everything for. But the person who walked out wasn't her husband. Not anymore. By sunrise, Daniel would be fighting for his life in a hospital bed, and Sarah would be gone. What happened in those 14 hours? What did she discover that was so horrifying, so devastating, that she couldn't stay even one more minute? And what did they do to Daniel behind those prison walls that destroyed everything he was? Before we go any further, I need you to imagine something. The person you love most in this world comes home after years apart. You've waited, you've sacrificed, you've held on to hope when everyone told you to let go. And then, in one single moment, you discover they've been destroyed. Not by their own choices, but by the system that promised to rehabilitate them. Would you stay? Would you run? Keep that question in your mind, because what happened to Daniel and Sarah will make you question everything you believe about justice, about love, and about how far you'd go for someone you care about. Welcome to Silent Witness True Crime Stories. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe, and also download your free ebook by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Alabama, a quiet southern city where church bells ring every Sunday and everyone knows your name. This is where Daniel and Sarah Wright built what looked like a perfect life. They met at Riverside Baptist Church in 2009. Daniel was the youth pastor, charming and beloved by everyone who knew him. Kids gravitated toward him. Parents trusted him completely. Sarah was a pediatric nurse, quiet and compassionate, the kind of person who'd stay hours past her shift to comfort a scared child. They were that couple, the ones who made marriage look easy, the ones who volunteered at food banks on Saturdays and held hands during Sunday service. Friends said they were soulmates. For 3 years, life was everything they'd dreamed of. A small house on Maple Street, weekend barbecues, talk of starting a family. But Daniel was hiding something, a gambling addiction that started small with fantasy football, but grew into weekend trips to casinos in Mississippi. The lies piled up, the debts multiplied, and then in March 2014, everything collapsed. An internal audit at the church revealed that Daniel had stolen $63,000 from the youth ministry fund to feed his addiction. When the pastor confronted him, Daniel broke down completely. He admitted everything, begged for forgiveness, promised to make it right. But the pastor had no choice. He called the police. The arrest made headlines. Youth pastor embezzles church funds. The community was devastated. Parents felt betrayed. Church members felt violated. And Sarah felt like her world had shattered into a million pieces. But she didn't leave. Even when her friends begged her to, even when her family said she was making a mistake. She showed up to every court hearing. She visited Daniel in county jail. She held his hand and told him the same thing every single time. "I forgive you. I'll wait for you. Just come back to me clean." In October 2014, Daniel was sentenced to 6 years at Holman Correctional Facility with the possibility of parole after 5. Sarah sat in that courtroom and watched them lead her husband away in handcuffs. She didn't cry. She just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, making a silent promise. "I'll be here when you get out." But the man who would come home 5 years later wouldn't be the same person she watched walk into that prison. Not even close. For 5 years, Sarah's life became about one thing: waiting. She never missed a single Saturday visit, not once. Every week, she'd drive 93 miles to Holman Correctional Facility, endure the humiliating security searches, and sit in that visitation room that smelled like bleach and broken dreams just to see Daniel for 2 hours. In the beginning, he seemed hopeful. He talked about the classes he was taking, the therapy sessions, how he was reading his Bible again. Sarah clung to those words. She worked double shifts at the hospital to pay off his restitution. She moved into a cheaper apartment. She stopped going to church because she couldn't handle the stares and whispers. Her entire world shrank down to those Saturday visits and the phone calls in between. But around year 3, something changed. Daniel's letters got shorter, his phone calls less frequent. During visits, he wouldn't look her in the eye. His body language was different, closed off. When she'd reach across the table to touch his hand, he'd flinch and pull away. Sarah asked him over and over if something was wrong. He'd always say the same thing. "I'm fine. Prison is hard. I'm just tired." But she knew. Deep in her gut, she knew something terrible was happening to him. Then in August 2018, Sarah received a letter that made her blood run cold. Daniel's handwriting was shaky, barely legible. The message was brief. "Something is happening to me. I don't know how to explain it. I'm scared. Please don't ask me about this during visits. Just know that I love you." That was it. No explanation, no follow-up. Sarah called the prison immediately, desperate for answers. They told her all inmate information was confidential. If there was a serious concern, she'd be notified. She never was. For the next 14 months, Sarah lived in constant anxiety. She contacted lawyers, prisoners' rights groups, even a journalist who'd written about Holman. No one could help her, or no one would. As Daniel's release date approached, he became even more distant. His final letters were robotic, just logistics about his parole hearing and coming home. But Sarah could read what he wasn't saying. Daniel was terrified, and she had no idea why. When she got the call that his parole had been approved, Sarah should have felt joy, relief, hope. Instead, she felt dread. November 18th, 2019, 8:17 in the morning. Sarah sat in her car outside Holman, 30 minutes early, gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. At 8:32, the gate buzzed open. And there he was. Daniel looked like a ghost. He'd lost so much weight that his clothes hung off his frame. His face was hollow, his eyes empty. When he saw Sarah, he didn't smile. He just stood there, frozen, like he wasn't sure this was real. Sarah got out and walked toward him slowly. Something about the way he was looking at her made her afraid to move too fast. When she wrapped her arms around him, his body was rigid, tense. It took him several seconds before his arms came up and held her loosely, like he'd forgotten how to embrace someone he loved. "I missed you." Her voice cracked. Daniel's whisper was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "I missed you too." The drive home was suffocating. Sarah tried to make small talk, but Daniel just stared out the window in silence. He didn't ask about her job, didn't ask about their families, didn't ask about anything. When they got to the house, Daniel stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside. Sarah had cleaned everything, bought him new clothes, stocked his favorite foods in the fridge. She'd even framed their wedding photo and put it on the nightstand. But when Daniel saw that photo, he picked it up, stared at it for a moment, then set it face down. Sarah's heart sank. By noon, she'd made lunch, grilled cheese and tomato soup, his favorite. Daniel ate mechanically, like he couldn't taste anything. Sarah watched him across the table, searching for the man she'd married. But he wasn't there. "What do you want to do today?" Daniel looked up, his eyes empty. "Sleep. That's all I want to do." He went into the bedroom and closed the door. Sarah sat alone at the kitchen table, fighting back tears. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Hours passed. Daniel didn't come out until almost 6 in the evening. He sat on the couch, but kept careful distance between them. When Sarah reached over to hold his hand, he pulled away. Her voice trembled. "Why won't you let me touch me?" Daniel stared at the floor. "I'm sorry. I just need time." "Time for what?" He stood up abruptly. "I need to take a shower." In the bathroom, Sarah heard the water running. Then she heard something else. crying, deep, broken sobs that sounded like they were being ripped from his chest. She stood outside the door with her hand on the knob, tears streaming down her own face, not knowing whether to go in or respect his space. She chose wrong. She gave him space. When Daniel came out, he wouldn't look at her. Sarah followed him into the bedroom. "We need to talk." Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, his hands shaking. "I know." "Then talk to me." "Please." His voice broke. "They did something to me." Sarah felt ice flood her veins. "What do you mean?" "In prison. They did something to me." Her heart was pounding. "What did they do?" Daniel shook his head, covering his face. "I can't talk about it. You have to. I'm your wife." Daniel finally looked at her, his eyes red and swollen. "I signed a consent form. They said it was for a medical study, that it would help with anger management, impulse control. They said it was voluntary. They said it was safe." Sarah's voice was barely audible. "What kind of study?" Daniel walked to his bag and pulled out a large manila envelope. His hands were trembling as he handed it to her. "Read it. Then you'll understand why I can't be your husband anymore." Sarah opened the envelope. Inside were medical documents, intake forms, lab results. And then she saw it. A surgical report dated March 2017. The procedure was listed as chemical castration with supplementary penile reduction surgery. The words blurred. Sarah read them again, and again. Her hands started shaking so violently she almost dropped the papers. She looked up at Daniel. He was across the room with his back to her, his shoulders shaking. "Oh my God. Oh my God, Daniel." Daniel's voice was hollow, dead. "They told me it would make me less aggressive, less likely to reoffend, that it would help me get paroled faster. They said it was reversible." His voice cracked. "They lied." Sarah couldn't breathe. She looked back at the documents, follow-up reports describing side effects, depression, loss of identity, suicidal ideation. "This is illegal. This has to be illegal." Daniel turned around, tears streaming down his face. "I signed the papers. They made it legal. You were coerced. You didn't understand what you were signing." Daniel slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor. "I signed because they told me inmates in the program got paroled faster. So I let them do it. And now I'm not even a man anymore. I can't be a husband. I can't give you children. I can't even recognize myself when I look in the mirror." Sarah dropped to her knees in front of him. "You're still you. You're still my husband." Daniel looked at her with so much pain it physically hurt. "No, I'm not. I'm broken. And I'm never going to be fixed." When Sarah reached for him, he pushed her hands away. "Don't. Please. I can't handle being touched." Sarah sat back, tears pouring down her face. "What do you want me to do?" Daniel's voice cracked completely. "I want you to leave. I want you to forget I exist. I want you to find someone who can actually be what you need. Because I never will be." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not leaving you." Daniel's laugh was bitter. "You should run as far away from me as you can." The silence that followed was unbearable. Finally, Sarah stood up. "I need air." She grabbed her keys and left. She drove aimlessly through empty streets, her mind spinning. She pulled into a gas station parking lot and just sat there, engine running, staring at nothing. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister. "How's the reunion?" Sarah stared at the message. She couldn't respond. "How do you explain that your husband came home destroyed? That the system that was supposed to rehabilitate him had mutilated him instead?" She turned off her phone. For 2 hours, she sat in that parking lot trying to process what she'd learned. When she finally drove home, it was almost midnight. The house was dark. Daniel was in bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. "Did you leave?" "No. I just needed to think." "And?" Sarah's voice broke. "I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help you. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." Daniel looked at her. "Then go. I mean it. Just go." Something inside Sarah shattered. She sat on the bed and took his hand. He tried to pull away, but she held on. "I'm not going anywhere. Not tonight." Daniel closed his eyes. "You will eventually. Everyone does." At 3 a.m, Sarah woke up alone. She found Daniel in the kitchen sitting in the dark with a half-empty bottle of whiskey. "Where did you get that?" He didn't look at her. "Had someone get it for me before I got out. Prison connections. You shouldn't be drinking." Daniel poured another glass, his words slurred. "I shouldn't do a lot of things, but here we are." Sarah reached for the bottle. Daniel grabbed her wrist, not hard but firm enough to stop her. "Don't." She pulled back. "Talk to me." Daniel downed the whiskey in one gulp. "What do you want me to say? That I hate myself? That I wish I'd never been born?" "Because it's all true." Tears filled Sarah's eyes. "Tell me how we move forward." Daniel laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "We don't. There is no forward. There's just this. A broken man drinking himself to death while you watch." His voice rose. "Is that what you want? To die?" Daniel looked her straight in the eye. "Every single day." Sarah stood up, her voice shaking. "Then why did you come home? Why didn't you just stay in prison if you're so determined to give up?" "Because I wanted to see you one more time. I wanted to tell you the truth, and I wanted to give you permission to leave." Sarah's voice broke completely. "I don't need your permission." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know, but you have it anyway." They stood in that dark kitchen staring at each other, and Sarah realized something that crushed her. She couldn't save him. She couldn't fix what had been done. And maybe he didn't want to be saved. Maybe he just wanted to self-destruct in peace. She walked back to the bedroom and lay down, staring at the ceiling. She heard Daniel collapse on the couch, heard the TV turn on. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those medical documents, those clinical descriptions of what they'd done to her husband. By 7 a.m, Sarah made a decision. She pulled out a suitcase and started packing. Clothes, essentials, documents. She moved quickly, trying not to think too hard about what she was doing. She couldn't stay. She couldn't watch him destroy himself. She couldn't fix this. She carried the suitcase to the door. Then she looked back at Daniel, passed out on the couch, the empty whiskey bottle on the floor beside him. She thought about waking him, thought about saying goodbye. But what would she say? "I'm sorry. I love you. I can't do this." So she said nothing. She just left, closed the door, got in her car, and drove away. It was 8:43 in the morning, 14 hours and 11 minutes since Daniel had walked out of prison. When he woke up 3 hours later, she was gone. And within hours, he'd be fighting for his life. Daniel woke up at noon to an empty house. He called Sarah. Voicemail. He texted. No response. Her clothes were gone, her car was gone, she'd left him, just like he'd told her to, just like he knew she would. For hours, Daniel fell apart. He screamed, he punched walls. He looked at the pills in Sarah's medicine cabinet and thought about how easy it would be to end everything. But he couldn't do that to her. So instead, he did something else. If he couldn't save himself, maybe he could save others. Daniel grabbed the manila envelope and photographed every document, every surgical report, every consent form, every follow-up note describing the horrors of what they'd done. He drafted an email to the Southern Poverty Law Center, attached everything, and hit send. It was 7:34 in the evening. For a moment, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe this would matter. Maybe other men wouldn't suffer like he had. But within minutes of sending that email, everything changed. By 8:15, Daniel started feeling sick, dizzy, nauseous, his heart racing. By 8:45, he couldn't stand. He stumbled to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. His pupils were huge. His skin was gray. Something was very wrong. He reached for his phone to call for help. Everything went black. At 9:37, a neighbor heard a crash and called 911. Officers found Daniel unconscious on the bathroom floor. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital. Toxicology results showed a lethal combination of benzodiazepines and alcohol in his system. But Daniel hadn't taken any pills. He'd thought about it, but he'd put them back. So where did the drugs come from? Detective Laura Chen started investigating. She pulled security footage from nearby businesses. Most showed nothing. But a gas station 2 blocks away had captured something chilling. At 7:15 that evening, a dark sedan with tinted windows pulled up to Daniel's house. 2 men got out. They were inside for less than 10 minutes. Then they left. Detective Chen ran the plates. The car belonged to a private security firm that did off-the-books work. Within hours, she had 2 men in custody, and they broke quickly. They worked for a contractor hired by the Alabama Department of Corrections. Their job was simple: monitor parolees from the experimental program, make sure they didn't talk, and if they did, silence them. When Daniel sent that email at 7:34, alarms went off. By 7:45, the Department of Corrections knew. By 7:50, the order was given. By 8:15, Daniel was drugged. It wasn't supposed to kill him, just incapacitate him long enough to destroy the evidence. But they miscalculated. Or maybe they didn't care. Daniel survived. Barely. 2 weeks in the ICU. When he finally woke up, Detective Chen told him everything: the men who broke in, the drugs, the cover-up. Daniel listened in silence. Then he asked the only question that mattered. Did Sarah know? No. She had nothing to do with this. She's been trying to see you. Daniel closed his eyes. I need to talk to her. When Sarah walked into that hospital room, they just stared at each other. Then Sarah broke down crying. I shouldn't have left. I should have stayed. Daniel shook his head. No, you did the right thing. What they did to you, what they tried to do, Sarah whispered. It's evil. Daniel reached for her hand. She took it. I sent those documents everywhere, to lawyers, to journalists. People are going to know. Sarah squeezed his hand. You're so brave. Daniel's laugh was weak. No, I'm just tired of being afraid. Over the next few months, the case exploded into a national scandal. Reporters uncovered evidence of dozens of men subjected to the same program. Some died by overdose. Some took their own lives. Some simply vanished after release. None gave informed consent. None were told it was irreversible. Federal investigators stepped in. The program was officially shut down. The corrections director resigned. The prison doctor fled the state. Daniel became the face of a Supreme Court case. But legal victories don't heal trauma. Daniel and Sarah tried to rebuild. They went to therapy. They talked about adoption, about the future, about finding a way forward. But the distance between them never fully closed. Not because the love was gone, but because Daniel couldn't love himself. And you can't build a marriage when one person is drowning and the other is exhausted from trying to save them. In April 2021, they divorced. It was quiet, sad, necessary. In the courthouse parking lot, they hugged one last time. Sarah told him she'd always care about him, that she didn't regret waiting. Daniel told her he wanted her to be happy, to find someone who could give her the life she deserved. Then they let each other go. Today, Daniel lives in Tennessee. He works for a prisoners' rights organization. He's written a book. He gives talks. He's found purpose, but he's never found peace. Sarah remarried in 2023. She's a nurse practitioner now with a daughter. She's happy, or as happy as you can be after living through something like that. They don't speak anymore. Not out of anger, but because sometimes moving forward means letting go completely. The men who drugged Daniel served 18 months. The contractor was never charged. The Alabama Department of Corrections paid an undisclosed settlement. The program officially never existed. And that's what haunts me most. Not that it happened, but that it's still happening. In different forms, different facilities, different names. We've decided as a society that prisoners aren't fully human, that their bodies are expendable. Daniel Wright's story isn't an anomaly, it's a warning. 14 hours. That's how long it took for everything to fall apart. So I want to ask you something. What would you do? If the person you loved came home destroyed by the system meant to help them, would you stay? Would you fight? Would you run? How would you feel standing in Sarah's shoes, reading those documents? How would you feel in Daniel's place, carrying that shame and violation? Tell me in the comments. Because these conversations matter, this discomfort matters. It's the first step toward change. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more stories that need to be told. I'll see you in the next one.